Running a learning business today requires attention to growing reach, generating revenue, and demonstrating real impact, all while navigating constant change and fierce competition for learners' time and money.
To help, we've curated a collection of free resources for learning business professionals. You'll find frameworks, briefings, and reports, webinars, and tools focused on strategy, portfolio design, pricing, marketing, and more, all created specifically for organizations that sell continuing education and professional development.
If you care about building a stronger, more sustainable learning business, visit leadinglearning.com/free resources.
That's leadinglearning.com/free resources for practical tools and strategic insight to help you grow your reach, revenue, and impact.
If you want to grow the reach, revenue, and impact of your learning business, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Certification, certificate, micro-credential, badge. These terms often get lumped together, but they're not interchangeable. They represent different business models, different purposes, and different promises to learners and employers.
Our guest in this episode, number 483, is Denise Roosendaal, Executive Director of the Institute for Credentialing Excellence. Denise has worked for more than 35 years in the credentialing space and has led I.C.E. for 15 of them.
Denise walks us through the credentialing landscape, which includes a whopping 1.8 million credentials in the U.S. marketplace, and what that ecosystem means for workforce development and the learning businesses operating in it.
You and she also cover how assessment is evolving from point-in-time tests toward ongoing real-world evidence of competence and what that may mean for credentialing bodies and the learning businesses.
And Denise makes a case for why durable, uniquely human skills, things like critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving, are going to matter more, not less, as AI reshapes the workforce.
If you offer credentials or are thinking about adding them to your portfolio, or if you simply want to understand where credentialing is headed, listen to this conversation with Denise Roosendaal.
And so for listeners who are maybe not super familiar with the Institute for Credentialing Excellence, give us a short version of what I.C.E. does, kind of the problems that it exists to solve or the work it exists to support.
Excellent. So I.C.E. is a community of credentialing professionals. These professionals want to raise the bar on credentialing best practices. So this community has always been incredibly generous with their thought leadership, what's working, what's not working, sharing things that they have learned, lessons learned. And so now we are pushing the envelope on what the future holds for credentialing. And whether that is, the standards that we have and a credit to, which is NCCA for certification programs, and I.C.E. 1100 for assessment-based certificate programs, we are always looking to figure out how programs build and maintain high-quality, rigorous certification programs. So we, in addition to the standards, we offer education for those individuals who are making their way in the certification credentialing world. We offer research that really tries to hit at those highly relevant and important aspects of this work, and how can we talk about it? How do we benchmark it? How do we tell the story of credentialing, both internal to those organizations that understand credentialing, as well as to external audiences who may not be as familiar with the terms we use or how we go about it or the purpose that it plays in the marketplace. We also have a certificate program ourselves for credentialing topics, and we also have the I.C.E. CCP certification program. And we are always trying to educate the association world and population on credentialing and the role that it plays, and trying to recognize those who have demonstrated the proficiency in the certification field that we want to aim toward. Really, some of the topics that we are leading on, I think, is how we articulate the value of credentialing, what it means for the individual certificate, what it means for the employers, what it means for external stakeholders like regulators, legislators, third-party payers, how they think about credentialing as a sign of competence in the field. We also, as I mentioned, like to think a lot about the future of credentialing and exercising foresight and understanding what all the signals in the marketplace might be telling us about credentialing and really how the business of credentialing may be evolving. I know we're going to talk probably some about AI, but there's so many aspects of the business of credentialing. 95% of our members are nonprofit organizations, 501c3, C6 organizations. And so they are on a mission to protect and uplift their profession with the work that they do in identifying competence, talking about competence, measuring competence in their field. So those are the topics and the areas that we are trying to address in our work. And we feel that we have a very tight-knit community, but always welcoming others who are curious, just want to understand a little bit more. While we like to see programs get accredited so that they can demonstrate that they have met those standards, not all of our members are accredited. And so many organizations come into I.C.E. to just better inform themselves about best practices, create a community and network of other certification professionals who talk their language and understand the terms that we use. And so I'm very proud to represent this organization and the community.
I know that one of the things that can be an issue in this space is terminology. We have different things. We have certification, we have certificates, we have micro-credentials, we have digital badges, we have a lot of other terms. Those are just a few. So I would love to hear from you about where you see the biggest points of confusions and what distinctions really matter with some of those terms.
Great question. And in the 15 years that I've been with I.C.E., this continues to be a very important topic because terminology, words matter. And so how we talk about what we do is important. We have a terminology document that we are just about to release. It's an updated version of our 2020 document, and it's going to get into some of the distinctions that I'll talk about. But we use credentialing as that umbrella term, right? It means everything that can be used to recognize skill or competence or knowledge. Certification is a subset, certificate, micro-credentials, diplomas, apprenticeships, badging, all of that fits underneath that credentialing umbrella. And this is important because these are different business models and they are intended to achieve specific and different outcomes. We've seen a lot of misapplication of these terms, especially between certification and certificate programs. And let me just sort of underscore that a little bit. Certification is intended to recognize the knowledge, skills, and abilities that an individual has acquired in their career through education or practice or their occupation. It typically requires or has eligibility requirements. It has renewal obligations and typically has a rigorous assessment. And then once an individual achieves success in the application process, then they can carry a designation, letters after their name. A certificate program is an educational program with specific learning objectives that should be demonstrated in the course assessment, assuming there is a course assessment at the end. So it's a point in time measurement of understanding of those learning objectives. It typically does not have the eligibility or renewal requirements. And according to our standards, the I.C.E. 1100 standards, it doesn't carry a designation after a person's name. And so that's where the confusion comes in the marketplace, and we recognize that. But we have stuck with that distinction because we didn't want to contribute to the confusion in the marketplace. We wanted a clear distinction. One is not better than the other. One is meant to be recognition, while the other is meant to be an indication of an individual having gone through an educational course. So they are very different in the way that they operate and what they're trying to accomplish for their certificates. There's another sort of class of emerging models, which are those micro credentials that you mentioned, and typically that will come with a badge. In our terminology, we like to think about badging as the recognition of having demonstrated skills attained, but we recognize that in other spaces, especially in the academic field, badging is the program itself. And so we understand that there are differences in how we describe these things. But for us, micro-credentialing just means a smaller slice of the overall skill set that has been articulated for a profession or occupation. And you can get really creative with that micro-credential. You can create stackable models, perhaps a series. Maybe they are synchronous, maybe they're asynchronous, maybe they are meant to build on one another, maybe they are all discrete. But it's a really interesting way to get in the game of skill set identification, skill set training, and recognition. And I think what's important here is that the field has begun to respond to what learners are telling us, which is they want those smaller bits of recognition. They want to be able to say, I'm proficient in this area, and let me put that on my LinkedIn, let me put that in my resume, so that they can indicate to employers that they have gone through training, they have gone through a series of a program to get recognized. I think it's also important that we understand what employers are telling us. And employers are saying, according to a study out of Northeastern University, I think, the employers are telling us this is great, be innovative, make sure you're responding to the marketplace. But what we need as employers is validated skills. So let's just not forget the assessment component of those items so that we know that they have been validated in the process. And really what's important with all of these models is to understand what's the goal of the organization in creating such a program, understanding the market, doing the market research so that employers and potential participants have had a say in what they want or need or what they think is relevant, really doing that rigorous work to identify the key competencies, so especially in the case of a certification where you've got to identify what will be assessed and getting very clear about what that is. That's super important. It takes time, it takes money, but that investment is well worth it. I can't tell you how many programs come to us and they say, hey, we're 2, 3, 4 years in and the program's not growing. And then we realize they didn't do any of that homework. And they didn't do any of the sort of connection between the goal of the organization and what it is they were putting out in the marketplace. And so in many cases, they have to start from ground zero and start all over. It's very difficult to go back and retrofit a program if that work hasn't been done. We have resources on all of this. And so one of the things that I would point to in addition to the terminology document is something that we call the defining features document, which is literally putting certificate programs next to certification programs and outlining what those differences are. It's free, downloadable for anyone. We just want the community to be educated on this. There's also a video. Many folks have reported to us that they use the video with their boards so that they can help them understand the differences. And we also have a strategic questions document, again, free, downloadable to anyone. That is a really good checklist for boards to go through and say, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? And let's go through these series of questions to get alignment. So just a couple of resources that we have on this topic, but a super important topic.
Running a learning business today requires attention to growing reach, generating revenue, and demonstrating real impact, all while navigating constant change and fierce competition for learners' time and money.
To help, we've curated a collection of free resources for learning business professionals. You'll find frameworks, briefings, and reports, webinars, and tools focused on strategy, portfolio design, pricing, marketing, and more, all created specifically for organizations that sell continuing education and professional development.
If you care about building a stronger, more sustainable learning business, visit leadinglearning.com/free resources.
That's leadinglearning.com/free resources for practical tools and strategic insight to help you grow your reach, revenue, and impact.
When you look at the credentialing landscape today, what would you point to that feels most important for learning businesses to understand about where credentialing is now and where it may be heading?
Well, so let me throw some stats at you because that sort of gives us a foundation to work from. Credential Engine has a report out. They updated it last year. There are 1.8 million credentials in the US marketplace. Now, that includes academic diplomas, it includes badges, so it's a big, wide ecosystem. But 1.8 million credentials is a lot, and it's serving an important population. This report goes on to say that the field of adult education served by these credentials is a $2.3 trillion industry. So that's significant. Now, if you break down the 1.8 million credentials, we're looking at 14,000 professional licenses, 6,900 certifications, and 3,400 micro credentials. So all of those are a subset of that 1.8 million. But the key here is that this ecosystem is growing. Employers and academic environments, they have recognized the importance of not only traditional models, but also innovative models for making sure folks feel that they have the skills that they need and then connecting them with employers in their fields. So I do hope, this is a subset editorial comment, I do hope that this ecosystem, this industry is growing for the right reason, because it's not just about the monetary gain, but it's about the enhancement of the workforce. And that's why I like the fact that I.C.E. is so filled with nonprofit organizations, because there is a business component to this, and these nonprofits have to operate under business constraints just like everyone else. But I feel that with a nonprofit mission orientation, then they are really thinking hard about what it takes to be proficient in their profession. And that's really important. There are a lot of for-profit entities in this space as well. I'm not going to knock that, but it's really important that we make sure that the competencies that are associated with a profession are well articulated and the value of a credential is well defined. That's a real hallmark of those that are in this for the right reason. And I just want to say a quick word about Foresight, because I think this is, again, sort of as we think about this landscape, and where are we headed. I.C.E. has been doing a lot of work in the future of credentialing. We have an incredibly large toolkit, and we can talk more about that in a second. But I think that it's important to think about the culture of Foresight within an organization. We're all so busy in our day-to-day worlds, and it's hard to lift our heads out of that grindstone, but to look to the horizon and really understand what's possible, what's headed our way, what the risks and opportunities are, and building the future scenarios so that we can say, okay, this is the place we want to go, and then how do we begin to make those decisions to get there, right? So nonprofits are, like many organizations, have a finite set of resources, and so deploying those resources in a way that can help the organization get to that preferred future is critically important. So I often talk about this as the culture and the competency of Foresight, building that into the organizational mindset, into their practices. And so as I think about that future landscape, I can't tell a particular profession this is exactly what's happening or going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but Foresight really helps us gain the language to begin the analytical, the analysis of those potential futures, and get comfortable in a very uncomfortable space. So in talking about sort of the I.C.E.'s look at the future of credentialing, we have a paper that we've written that looks at the future of credentialing through the lens of technology, through the lens of the business model, and then through the lens of government and how they may have a say in that future as well. So, and we have got a lot of tools that go along with that to help begin to have that uncomfortable conversation with governing bodies, with certificants, and to really begin to digest what that future might look like. I suspect we should probably talk about AI here, which AI is an important component. And I am a big advocate of making sure we think about what AI can bring. I feel like we're over the hump in terms of the fear factor of AI, and it's an important aspect. We need to think about the harm or the risk that AI might bring, but I feel like many credentialing bodies are really diving into what are those opportunities that AI can bring them. Always with the caveat of, hey, anytime we're using AI, we've got to have that human intervention, that human element. And so really thinking about what those opportunities might be, making sure we're gathering data about how we're using AI and what those improvements might be. But there's a lot of great opportunity with AI, and we shouldn't be so afraid of it. Other topics that we're certainly looking at are, what are the impacts of the changes in higher ed? What are the needs for alternative pathways for eligibility for certification? What might be the impact of that sort of ideological battleground that we might find ourselves in with state or federal stakeholders, things like that. So a lot of topics that we're looking at. I think I've only scratched the surface here.
I know that foresight is such an important topic for you and an area of focus. And I know that you've connected foresight to just the idea of kind of the future of professions and the workforce and where things are going there. How would you suggest that learning businesses think about their role and how they can shape the future of the fields that they serve? So they're not just observing, what's happening, but they're trying to have that influence on where things might go.
Really important question. And I highly recommend for organizations to look out at the field and see what the data might be telling us. One report that I rely on heavily and cite often is the World Economic Forum. They released a 2025 version of the study of the future of the workforce. And they are predicting significant shifts in the types of occupations and the growth of occupations just in the next 5 years. So 2030, they're saying there's going to be a 7% growth, but that's not a straight line growth. That's retiring of many occupations, which may become obsolete, even as we grow new professions and occupations that we haven't even seen or understand just yet. But another piece that's in that report talks about durable skills, which I think is critically important for us to think about. They have a top 10 list of skills that would be needed by 2030, top 10. And you would think that would be largely occupied by technological skills. 2 or 3 of them do talk about the importance of understanding technology, but the rest of them are all about durable skills. It's all about how we are uniquely human and what the humans are bringing to their occupation. So it's critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, teamwork. And so I can't say enough about this report and how they are setting up and shaping that conversation around durable skills. I also think that we have to think about how we measure those skills. And that's going to be a big challenge for credentialing bodies moving forward. There's a lot of research out there on how it's being done. But one of the things that I ran across in a conference that I attended, it was an AI application to teach doctors how to have better bedside manners. And I thought, AI is teaching doctors how to be better humans. And I thought that was really interesting, but I can't emphasize enough how important I believe human skills will be in the future of our workforce. ASAE, so American Society for Association Executives, they have a workforce, or I'm sorry, they have a Foresight Works set of drivers. They look at 50 different drivers. And one of them that I have relied on heavily in the I.C.E. world is more human humans. And so how are we going to deploy those ideas moving forward? But in thinking about the foresight or the ways that we're thinking about foresight, I should also probably mention I.C.E.'s partnership in advancing workforce mobility initiative. It's a grant coming out of the Education Design Lab, and we are partnering up with the Credential Engine. It's funded by the Walmart Foundation, and it's a really significant grant to think about how we might analyze or build a prototype for using micro internships for skills validation. And CredUp Hub, led by Mickey Rops, she's going to help us think through that. We don't have all the answers yet, but again, this is a really innovative way to think about what the future of credentialing might look like if we get creative. So I'm really excited about that work as well.
You're just talking about durable skills, talking about, workforce mobility, those sorts of things. Clearly tied in with part of that then is just the assessment. How do you measure, as you were saying, some of these skills and knowledge? And I know that you've argued that you think in the future assessment systems may increasingly draw more on real-time, on-the-job kind of evidence of proficiency. So maybe talk a little bit about how you see assessment evolving and what that might mean for maybe what I'll call more traditional credentialing approaches.
It's a really important area and one that's evolving quickly, and I don't have all the answers, but here's what I'm learning. And I want to do a shout out to our psychometricians in the space because they are going to want to make sure that whatever we do in the future is psychometrically sound. And so they are looking at this as well. But I think that technology is going to have a profound impact on how we gather performance data. So currently, we rely quite a bit on measuring continuing competence, either through assessments or maybe portfolio reviews, where a team of individuals analyze skills. But I believe that technology can do can take us incredibly far in terms of how we measure and collect that performance data. So one thing I'm hearing quite a bit about is wearable technology. And what does that mean for that on-the-job measurement? And then over time, what does that mean for calculating enhancement of performance, and how do we demonstrate that performance over time? One of the great examples that I've heard, and I use this a lot, I hope they're still innovating, but the idea of the individuals who work on trees, tree cutters, tree trimmers, right? So wearing technology in a helmet that might then measure how far they have or how much they have respected a cone of safety around a project that they're in, and whether they have impeded in that zone of safety or respected it. And then again, how they have changed their behavior over time. So calculating this real-time data and then analyzing it over time can give us a great indication of an individual's performance on the job. So I think there's some real promise there that's important. I also think that AI and other technologies will do a great world of good in terms of how we do initial assessments. I think performance testing will become more and more important, and perhaps more and more or less and less expensive, I guess, because I think they hold an important element for that initial assessment of how we are able to demonstrate in a practical kind of way the skills that we have identified for competence in a particular area. So I think that's a very intriguing area as well. Another area that I'm beginning to understand better is how organizations are investing in longitudinal examinations of competencies of their professions. So it's not just a point in time, but again, over time. I mean, this wearable technology idea is probably an example of longitudinal exams. But I think that what's interesting about it is that individual practitioners can get real-time feedback in terms of what they have learned or areas where they are weak so that they can begin to, I guess, enhance their professional development to seek better knowledge or skills in particular areas. And so some of this is the Mocha Minute, which is a model that many organizations have adapted where you get a question on your phone every day or once a week, and you answer that question. And over time, it begins to build to say, gosh, you're really strong in this area, but here's an area you might want to pay attention to in your professional development. And then some organizations are actually building that into their sort of recertification process. So I think that's really interesting and very promising innovations.
Yeah, I especially appreciate the idea of kind of moving beyond the point in time level of assessment, because it does seem to speak much more to true proficiency and true knowledge and skills. You began to talk a little bit too about professional development and kind of how that's like some of the feedback that professionals are getting, what might influence what professional development they undertake. A lot of the learning businesses that we work with are embedded in associations. They provide a lot of education and professional development to serve those professionals. We've been talking mostly about credentialing, but there is clearly this sort of other side, which is the education and the professional development. So talk about that relationship between education and credentialing. Where do you sort of see them naturally supporting one another? And then where is there a tension that might arise?
I think the tension is a healthy tension. It's a really important element and concept to think about, that sort of traditional separation of church and state that is in our own NCCA standards. And so this is all about the firewall approach. And there are good reasons for this separation. So let's hit those first. You don't want educational instruction to be so tied to an exam that you're teaching to the test. So that's a really important aspect. You want a well-rounded audience of subject matter experts developing the credentials so that you're not just relying on the educators to create the content that is used in a credential. So you want the creation of the credential to be separated from those who are building content. You want the exam development activities, item writing, exam development, job task analysis. You want those activities to be separate from education. The firewall is also really good for just good security measures and keeping each side of the house independent of each other so that exam questions and items are under good lock and key, even though educators can reference tools that programs will publish, like an exam blueprint or a body of knowledge, to make sure that folks understand what the exam will cover. So, and then lastly, there are really good governance reasons why you want this separation, so that there's not undue influence on the credentialing decision making from others in the organization. So just keeping those things clean is also important. But it's also important for credentialing bodies to understand the sort of lifelong learner nature of their constituency and be able to serve that. There's a really important element to understanding how the particular field is changing and changing quickly. And so you don't want to be so isolated from that constituency population or the education population that you're not appreciating how quickly those changes are coming about. And you want to make sure your credential is reflecting the important changes that are coming about. So, it's important that credentialing bodies respect that separation. But again, it's perfectly fine for organizations to be engaged in test prep or continuing education as long as they have that healthy respect for that firewall internally. And, I think that there are ways to navigate that. And again, we have a lot of resources on that, articles, things like that. So I do think this idea of lifelong learning is really important in society generally. And so we want to make sure that we are respecting those needs in our own communities as well.
Well, since you've brought up lifelong learning, I want to ask a question that we love to ask of all of our Leading Learning podcast guests, which is about your own lifelong learning. What are some of your specific habits, practices, or sources that you use to continue to grow?
So several years ago, I took the Clifton Strengths Finder and discovered that I am a learner That's one of my strengths. And when I learned that about myself, so many things finally made sense. I'm the one who's always asking questions like why or what if. I was that kid growing up, always asking your parents, annoying them on the road trip about asking about everything you see along the way. So I am definitely that person. And so curiosity to me is a real core value. I'm constantly reading. I have more books in my house than furniture I have to house them. I have a Kindle, I have my Audible app. I'm constantly enrolling in online classes in my spare time. I have 2 graduate degrees, and the second one that I got is in creative writing, and it was just for the fun of it. So I am constantly trying to feed my brain with good information. But I have to say that one of the things that I have found to be that really brings me joy and energy for my very tired brain is to sit in the room with really smart people and ask big questions. And this happened recently in a meeting between Smith Buckland, who is our management partner, and McKinley Advisors, where we just asked big questions. It was only an hour, but I left that meeting incredibly energized, just really thinking about how are we operating in this fast-changing environment that we're in. So I can't say enough about surrounding yourself with that kind of environment. Go to conferences, enroll in meetings, listen to podcasts like this. Really the importance of our network and learning from our network is critically important. And so those are the ways that I try to be a lifelong learner, and I don't think there's any end in sight.
That wraps up the conversation with Denise Roosendaal of the Institute for Credentialing Excellence. Stay with us for our recap.
You'll find show notes and a transcript for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 483, along with links to the I.C.E. site and some of the specific resources mentioned in the conversation, and a link to Denise's profile on LinkedIn. And if you found this episode valuable, we would be grateful if you'd share it so more people can find the show and benefit from the conversations we have.
Denise made the point that the terms we use in credentialing aren't just semantics. They reflect genuinely different models with different purposes. Knowing the distinctions between certification, certificates, and micro-credentials helps learning businesses make better strategic decisions about which fits their goals and their market.
On the future of assessment, Denise sees real promise in moving beyond point-in-time tests toward ongoing real-world evidence of competence. From wearable technology that captures on-the-job performance to longitudinal approaches that give practitioners feedback over time rather than at a single moment.
And as AI takes on more technical work, Denise believes that the skills that will matter most are the uniquely human ones: critical thinking, creativity, and problem solving. Credentialing bodies that get ahead of that shift will be better positioned to serve their professions.
Thanks again for listening, and see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.